Black Belt asked a black janitor to spar for fun. What happened next left everyone speechless. The hum of the vacuum cleaner was the only sound in the Westfield Sports Complex lobby that morning, its low whir blending with the faint echo of punching bags in the back rooms. Jerome "Jax" Carter worked with steady, practiced movements, pushing the machine in straight lines across the polished tile. His navy uniform shirt was neatly tucked in, sleeves rolled just past the elbow, revealing forearms that looked carved from old oak, weathered but strong. At 46, Jax moved at a deliberate pace, the kind of unhurried rhythm of a man who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. His eyes, deep brown and slightly hooded, seemed to take in more than he let on. He'd been at Westfield for 5 years now, long enough that most members barely noticed him beyond a polite nod. And as this story unfolds, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these stories. Post your location and local time in the comments below. Down the hall, Ethan Cole's voice rang out from the main dojo, sharp and confident. "That's it! Snappy on the pivot, faster with the return!" He moved between the students like a general inspecting troops, his black jai crisp and embroidered with gold lettering. The teenagers hung on his words, each kick and strike met with his approving nod. Jax passed by the glass wall that separated the dojo from the corridor. He slowed a moment, not stopping, just enough to watch. He'd never lost his appreciation for the art of movement, even after all these years. Inside, Ethan spotted him. His grin widened, and there was a flicker of mischief in his eyes. "Hey, old-timer!" he called out over the noise. The class turned toward the glass. "You ever try this stuff?" Jax gave a small smile, shaking his head. "Just here to clean." "Come on, we'll go lie." "Aight, just for fun," Ethan pressed, his tone dripping with playful challenge. The students tittered. One whispered loud enough for Jax to hear, "Bet he's never even thrown a punch." Jax adjusted his grip on the vacuum handle. "Not my thing," he said evenly, turning to move on. But Ethan wasn't done. "Scared?" he teased, his voice carrying enough that the parents in the viewing area looked over. Coach Ramirez, leaning against the far wall with his arms crossed, lifted a brow. "Leave the man alone, Ethan," he said without much force. The dojo floor seemed to buzz with anticipation. Jax could feel all those young eyes on him, waiting for him to flinch or laugh it off. Instead, he studied Ethan for a heartbeat, his expression unreadable. From the back of the room, Maya Reynolds, camera slung over her shoulder, watched quietly. She'd come for a youth boxing feature, but now her focus was on the janitor in the doorway, the one who carried himself like he was no stranger to an audience. Ethan stepped closer to the glass, gesturing toward the mat. "Just one round. Promise I'll take it easy." His grin was wide, but his gaze was sharp, testing. Something in Jax's chest stirred. He hadn't been on a mat in over 20 years. He could walk away, should walk away. But then he caught Maya's eyes. They held the kind of curiosity that said she saw more than most people here ever would. Jax sighed softly, almost imperceptibly, and nodded once. "All right," he said. "One round." The room erupted in murmurs, students grinning, parents leaning forward in their seats. Ethan's smile brightened, but there was a glint there, a man certain this would be an easy show for his audience. Coach Ramirez shook his head with a half-smile. "All right, let's see what you two can do." Jax stepped through the dojo doors, the faint scent of sweat and mat cleaner wrapping around him like an old memory. He sighed, it downed the vacuum in the corner and began rolling up his sleeves. The crowd thought they knew exactly what they were about to see. They had no idea. The soft slap of bare feet on the mat filled the air as Jax stepped forward. He moved without hurry, his posture relaxed, shoulders loose. Ethan, by contrast, was all sharp lines and coiled energy, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "All right," Coach Ramirez said, stepping between them. "Light contact, keep it clean. One round, no injuries." He glanced at Ethan as if the reminder was more for him than for Jax. Ethan bowed quickly, formal enough to satisfy etiquette, but without much warmth. Jax returned the bow, deeper, slower. His eyes never left Ethan's. The students lined up along the edge of the mat, whispering in anticipation. A couple of them pulled out their phones. Maya, leaning against the wall, lifted her camera but didn't take a photo yet. She wanted to watch. The moment Coach Ramirez stepped back, Ethan lunged. Not reckless, controlled, but with a speed meant to impress the crowd. His first jab stopped inches from Jax's chest, a teasing feint. He grinned at the students as if to say, "See? Easy." Jax didn't move. Ethan tried again, this time adding a flashy spin kick that cut through the air just shy of Jax's shoulder. The crowd chuckled. "Careful, Mr. Carter," one teenager called out, laughing. Still, Jax stood rooted, hands loose at his sides, his expression calm. Ethan's grin widened. "You gonna move, old man, or should I just tag you and call it a day?" "Take your best shot," Jax said softly. The challenge was so quiet most people didn't even hear it. But Ethan did. His smirk faltered for half a second before he reset, stepping in with a sharper, faster combination: jab, cross, hook. Jax tilted his head just enough for the first two to pass harmlessly by, then took a small step back from the hook. No wasted motion, no panic, just measured, almost lazy evasion. The laughter in the room dimmed, then bounced back a step, the beginnings of irritation in his eyes. "All right, let's make this interesting," he said. He darted forward again, this time with real intent. Low kick, high kick, straight punch. Jax's right foot slid back, weight shifting effortlessly. He raised one hand halfway, redirecting Ethan's punch with a subtle parry, and the younger man's momentum carried him a step too far forward. Maya caught it. That small opening. The kind of thing you don't see unless you've trained, unless you've watched countless fights. And she noticed something else. Jax's eyes weren't on Ethan's hands or feet. They were on his center, reading the whole body at once. But instead of taking the opening, Jax stepped away, giving Ethan space. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. The energy was changing. The playful teasing was starting to feel like something else, a test Ethan might not pass. Ethan's jaw tightened. He feinted left, then snapped a kick toward Jax's ribs, landing light contact. He exaggerated the bow afterward, grinning broadly at the audience. "Point for me," he announced. A couple of students clapped, but their cheers were thinner than before. Jax smiled faintly. "You keeping score?" "Of course," Ethan said, bouncing again, trying to reassert control. Jax's voice stayed level, but there was a glint in his eyes now. "Then you'd better be ready for the next round." Coach Ramirez raised his eyebrows. "Here we go," he thought. Maya finally lifted her camera. She could feel it. The temperature in the room was shifting, and something was about to give. Ethan's breathing had quickened, not from exhaustion, but from something harder to admit: impatience. The fun little spar wasn't going the way he'd pictured. He'd expected to dominate the janitor, get a few laughs, maybe even post a clip on social media. Instead, he was dancing around a man who seemed to absorb every move without breaking a sweat. The crowd sensed it too. The chuckles had died down. Now there was a hush, broken only by the squeak of feet on the mat and the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Ethan came in hard. No more feints, no more playful theatrics. A sharp low kick aimed at Jax's thigh, followed by a blistering cross. Jax moved like water, his right leg sliding back just enough to avoid the kick, his torso twisting so the punch skimmed air. His eyes stayed on Ethan's chest, reading the rhythm, waiting. From the sidelines, Maya lowered her camera for a moment. She'd been covering fights for nearly a decade, and she recognized the shift when a fighter stops playing and starts hunting. But here, it was reversed. Ethan was chasing. Jax was simply present. Ethan gritted his teeth and launched a spinning back kick, fast, tight form. It should have landed. It didn't. In a blink, Jax pivoted on his left foot, stepped inside the arc of the kick, and let Ethan's own momentum carry him past. The younger man stumbled forward 2 steps before catching himself. A ripple of murmurs swept through the onlookers. Coach Ramirez tilted his head, watching closely now. Something in the back of his mind itched with recognition. Ethan turned, forcing a smile. "Nice move. Guess you've done this before." Jax didn't answer. Annoyance flared in Ethan's eyes. He surged forward with a rapid-fire combination: jab, hook, elbow, closing the gap. For the first time, Jax's hands came up. He caught the hook on his forearm, turned the elbow aside with a subtle shoulder shift, and with almost casual precision, he placed his palm on Ethan's chest and gave a gentle push. Ethan staggered back a full step. The crowd went completely still. Maya's camera clicked once. Ethan's cheeks flushed. "All right," he said through a tight jaw. "You want to play? Let's play." He charged in, aiming to overwhelm with sheer speed. But Jax's stance had changed. Knees slightly bent, weighing. Jeet centered, hands loose but ready. It was the stance of someone who didn't just train, someone who owned the space he stood in. Ethan's fist shot forward. Jax slipped it and, in one seamless motion, swept Ethan's front leg with his own. The younger man's balance vanished. His back hit the mat with a muffled thud. Gasps erupted. Jax stepped back immediately, offering a hand. His voice was calm. "You all right?" Ethan stared up at him, pride stinging worse than the fall. He slapped Jax's hand away, springing to his feet. "Fluke," he muttered, but Maya could see it, the flicker of doubt in Ethan's eyes. And from the far corner, Coach Ramirez's expression had shifted entirely. He knew that sweep. He'd seen it before, years ago, in grainy footage of a fighter who had once been called unstoppable. For a long moment, no one moved. The thud of Ethan hitting the mat still seemed to hang in the air, like an echo that wouldn't fade. Jax stood where he was, breathing slow and steady, his expression unreadable. Ethan, chest rising and falling faster now, kept his eyes locked on the older man, as if staring hard enough might erase what had just happened. Coach Ramirez stepped forward, hands on his hips. "All right, that's—" "Again," Ethan cut in, voice sharp. Ramirez's brow furrowed. "Ethan, again," Ethan repeated, louder. The crowd shifted. They knew this wasn't about friendly sparring anymore. This was about pride. Jax's gaze softened just slightly, as though weighing the choice. He gave a small nod. "Your call." The second round began without Ramirez's formal signal. Ethan rushed in, abandoning the flashy moves for raw aggression. Tight punches, quick knees, trying to crowd Jax's space. But Jax didn't retreat. He slid to the side, parried, deflected, each movement so economical it looked almost lazy. Ethan's strikes hit nothing but air, or the side of Jax's forearm. "Come on," Ethan snapped, frustration bleeding through. "Fight!" Jax's voice was quiet. "I am." The next exchange came fast. Ethan threw a right hook. Jax ducked under, pivoted, and in the same breath, hooked his leg behind Ethan's and swept. This time, Ethan didn't just fall. He went down hard, landing flat on his back. A sharp gasp shot through the room. Ethan rolled quickly to his knees, but Jax was already stepping back, his palms open in a gesture of peace. "Control your breathing," he said calmly, the words more like a teacher's than an opponent's. Ethan got to his feet, the veins in his neck standing out, his ears burned red. "Enough," Coach Ramirez said firmly, stepping between them. But the younger man wasn't hearing it. "One more," he barked, and without waiting for approval, lunged forward. It happened in less than 2 seconds. Ethan's punch came straight and fast. Jax's body tilted just off-center, his right hand catching Ethan's wrist. With the smoothness of a silk ribbon falling, Jax shifted his weight and turned, and Ethan found himself twisted, off balance, and staring at the mat inches from his face. Jax released him instantly, stepping away. Silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Maya's finger hovered over the camera shutter, but didn't press. She knew this wasn't the moment to break with a click. It was the moment to feel. Jax turned toward Coach Ramirez. "That's enough for me," he said simply. Then to Ethan, "You're fast, strong. But fighting isn't about proving you're better. It's about respecting the person in front of you." And then he walked off the mat, heading for the corner where his vacuum still waited, as if the last 3 minutes had been nothing at all. For a heartbeat, the crowd just stared. Then the whispers began, low and urgent. "Who is he? Where'd he learn that? Did you see the way he moved?" Ethan stood frozen, chest heaving, sweat rolling down his temples, not from the effort alone, but from something heavier settling. And from the side, Coach Ramirez's eyes followed Jax with a recognition that had finally crystallized. Jerome Carter. The fighter no one had been able to beat. The man who had disappeared from the circuit decades ago without a trace. By the time Jax slipped back into the hallway, the dojo was buzzing. The sound was no longer playful. It was electric, almost reverent. The teenagers were wide-eyed, whispering in clusters. Parents leaned toward one another, trading fragments of questions they didn't have answers to. Ethan stayed on the mat, pacing like a caged animal. His black GI, once crisp and immaculate, now clung to his shoulders with sweat. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding the eyes of his students. Every laugh he'd coaxed from them earlier now felt like it had turned against him. Maya lowered her camera, a small, knowing smile curving her lips. She had enough in her head to write a story without a single photo. But she wanted more than just an account of a janitor who could fight. She wanted the truth behind it. Coach Ramirez walked over to Ethan. His voice was low, but the firmness in it cut through the room. "You had no business pushing that far." Ethan's jaw tightened. You just let your ego run the round," Ramirez interrupted. "And he let you. You should be asking yourself why." Ethan looked away. "I don't get it. He's just the janitor." Ramirez's eyes darkened. "No, he's Jerome Carter. And if you knew what that meant, you'd be embarrassed you ever called him old man." The name hit Ethan like a body shot. He didn't recognize it, but the weight in Ramirez's tone told him he should. "Who is he?" Ramirez didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the hallway, where Jax had vanished, and muttered almost to himself, "Ask him, if you've got the guts." Maya left the room, her sneakers quiet on the polished floor. She caught up to Jax in the lobby, where he was methodically coiling the vacuum cord. "You're not just a janitor," she said, leaning casually against the counter. He didn't look up. "Never said I was." "I know who you are. Jerome Carter. You disappeared after Nationals in '99. That made him pause. He straightened, the coil of cord resting in his hands. "And you're a reporter." "Sports journalist," she corrected with a faint smile. "And I think you just handed me the biggest story I've had all year." Jack shook his head. "I'm not interested in headlines." "I'm not talking about headlines," Maya said, stepping closer. "I'm talking about legacy. The kids in there just watched you dismantle a fourth-degree black belt without breaking a sweat. You think that doesn't mean something?" He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw it. The shadow of old disappointment. The kind that settles deep and never really leaves. "It means I've still got it," he said quietly. "But that's not the life I live anymore." Before she could answer, the murmur from the dojo grew louder. Someone had clearly told the rest of the gym what happened. People were filtering out into the lobby, glancing between Jax and the doorway like they were looking at two different worlds colliding. Ethan appeared, still flushed, eyes locked on Jax. There was no grin now, just something caught between defiance and shame. "Next week," Ethan said. "The exhibition. You and me, one more time, in front of everyone." Jax studied him for a long moment. "You sure?" Ethan's chin lifted. "Yeah, and this time, no holding back." The lobby went silent. Jax picked up the vacuum and wheeled it toward the storage closet. "All right," he said over his shoulder. "But remember, you asked for it." The day of the exhibition, the Westfield Sports Complex was packed. Folding chairs lined the edges of the dojo, and every seat was taken. Parents, students, coaches from other gyms, even a few old-timers from the fight community had shown up. The air hummed with anticipation, the kind that makes people lean forward without realizing it. Maya moved through the crowd with her camera, catching snippets of conversation. "He's the janitor, right?" "No, they say he's some old champion." "Nah, can't be, he's too old." She smiled to herself. They'd see soon enough. Ethan was already on the mat, stretching in his crisp black gi. He'd been training harder all week, replaying every moment of their first spar in his head. He told himself this time would be different. He wouldn't underestimate him, wouldn't let his ego cloud his focus. But beneath the determination, there was something else. A knot in his gut he couldn't shake. Jax entered quietly, wearing a plain gray t-shirt and loose black training pants. No belt, no ceremony, just calm steps that seemed to settle the air around him. He bowed to Coach Ramirez, then to Ethan as the murmurs rose. Ramirez's eyes flicked between them, his voice firm. 3 rounds. Respect the rules. Show the crowd what martial arts really means. The bow was deeper this time, from both men, and then the room went still. Ethan struck first, a clean, tight jab aimed at Jax's face. Jax slipped it and countered with a short hook that tapped Ethan's ribs. The exchange was fast, respectful, but the sharp pop of their movements told the room they weren't holding back. The crowd leaned in. Ethan threw a low kick. Jax checked it, then answered with a snap kick to the thigh that made Ethan grunt. There was no mocking, no taunting now, just a measured rhythm, the give and take of two fighters speaking in the language of movement. Halfway through the first round, Ethan found an opening, feinted high, then drove a right straight toward Jax's midsection. It landed, solid. The crowd reacted with a burst of cheers. Ethan stepped back, eyes sharp, waiting for Jax's answer. It came in the form of a burst of speed no one expected. Jax stepped inside Ethan's guard, delivered 2 crisp body shots, and pivoted out before Ethan could turn. The crowd roared. Round after round, Ethan pushed harder, but Jax's calm never cracked. Every time Ethan thought he'd cornered him, Jax redirected, flowed, or shut him down with a clean counter. By the final minute, sweat dripped from Ethan's jaw, his chest heaving. Jax looked almost untouched. Then it happened. Ethan launched a desperate high kick, aiming to clip Jax's temple. In one seamless motion, Jax ducked, swept Ethan's leg, and stopped his fist an inch from Ethan's face as the younger man hit the mat. Gasps filled the room. Jax stepped back, lowering his hand, and bowed. "Respect," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the silence. For a heartbeat, Ethan didn't move. Then, slowly, he pushed himself to his knees, chest still heaving, and bowed in return, lower, longer. His voice cracked when he spoke. "You're right. I had no respect. Not for you, not for the art. I was wrong." The crowd erupted in applause, not the explosive kind, but a deep, rolling wave that felt like it came from somewhere more genuine. Maya captured the moment. Ethan kneeling, Jax standing tall but humble, and knew her story had just found its ending. The applause faded into a quiet hum of conversation as people began to filter out, but the energy in the room remained, like the afterglow of a storm. Ethan stayed on the mat, still catching his breath. Coach Ramirez approached and rested a hand on his shoulder. "That's what martial arts is about," he said softly. "It's not about beating someone, it's about becoming better than you were yesterday." Ethan nodded. "I thought I understood that, but I didn't. Not until now." He glanced over at Jax, who was helping a younger student roll up the mats as if nothing had happened. Maya slipped over to Ethan. Her camera hung at her side now. "You okay?" she asked. He chuckled bitterly. "I lost. Bad." She tilted her head. "Or you learned. Big difference. Me." And while Jax moved quietly through the room, shaking hands with people who came up to him, students, parents, even strangers who just wanted to say they'd met him. None of it seemed to inflate his ego. His demeanor stayed grounded, almost shy. When the mats were stacked and the chairs folded, Jax finally walked over to Ethan. "You've got good instincts," he said, "but instincts need discipline. I can help you with that, if you want." Ethan's brows rose. "You'd train me after all that?" Jax shrugged. "Everybody deserves a second chance, especially the ones who know they need it." The words landed harder than any strike. Ethan extended his hand. Then, "Thank you. I'd like that." They shook, and it was more than a handshake. It was a quiet truce, the start of something new. As the crowd thinned, Maya stood by the door, reviewing her footage. She had everything. The first respectful bow, the clean exchanges, the final sweep, Ethan's bow in defeat. But as she watched, it wasn't just the fight she saw, it was the lesson, unfolding move by move. Later that week, her video went live. The title read, "The Janitor Who Taught a Black Belt the Real Meaning of Respect." It spread quickly, shared by fighters, teachers, parents, and anyone who'd ever been humbled by someone they underestimated. Comments poured in, not about who won the fight, but about the grace and humility Jax had shown, and the dignity in Ethan's acceptance. At the dojo, life went on. Kids still tripped over their own feet during drills, bags still thumped with every kick, but every now and then, a student would pause after training to help Jax stack chairs or mop the floor, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. And Ethan? He trained harder than ever, but this time, with his ego on the mat where it belonged. As for Jax, he kept cleaning the floors, stacking the mats, and moving through life without fuss. But those who'd seen him that day knew he wasn't just the janitor. He was the quiet storm in the corner, the living reminder that real power never needs to shout. And sometimes, the loudest lesson is taught in silence.